Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us. We are dedicated especially by Shalom Fogel. It's his mother's yahrzeit this evening. I never knew her name was Rivka. I knew her as Jeannie. But Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, and the Neshama should have a lichtige Gan Eden. Together with Yaakov Zeb ben Yehuda Arya, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam Bas Gad, Yosef ben Sion ben Yaakov Zeb, Lefu Shalema for Moshe Arya ben Miriam, for great Shidduch for Chayit Tzivya Bas Shoshana Gittel, a great Shidduch for Batya Bas Sarah, by Baruch Ian Le'ilei Nishmas Yaakov Chaim ben Abba, Esther Bas Yona, Avram ben Shmuel HaKohen, Lefu Shalema for Liba Bas Anya, Lefu Shalema for Yosef Shmuel ben Miriam, and for a great healthy mommy, healthy baby for Ariel and Lior Bas Elza Rivka. Okay, we're going to get right to it.
Hey, Rebbe, my mother's yahrzeit is tonight and tomorrow.
What?
She was a big fan of yours.
What's the name?
Nechama Riva Bas Yaakov HaKohen.
Nechama Riva Bas Yaakov HaKohen, and Neshama should have a great aliyah on her yahrzeit. Okay, we are holding by Amarava, which is three lines from the bottom of Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. Amarava, Shma Mina Tzorech Likshar Al Kol Chulya V'Chulya. We know that the Chulya are the 4 the 4 places where we make turns with the one of the fringes. What we do, our minig is to do 7, 8, 11, and 13. So Amar Rav Shmami not tzarich likshar kol chulya v'chulya. After each of the turns, you have to make a knot. Because if you'll say that you don't need to, Hada Amar b'nei Rebbe Chia gardumei tchelis ksherim. A stub of the tzitzis is kosher. V'gardume ezev kasherim, and a stub of the hyssop is kosher. We assume that when it means a stub is that the knot towards the last set of rotations was broken open. And if there's only one knot, so then all the rotations will undo, and then you would only have psil, and you wouldn't have gvil. You need to have Gvil and Psil. The ratio is 1/3 of the rotations and 2/3 of a hanging. If the top one means the furthest towards the bottom, kula, it would all unravel. Says, well, no. Dilma, maybe you don't have to make a knot in between each one. But Dilma, when we said that the Gardumen is good, it's talking about the Iktar, that you did make a knot. Now, V'amar Rabba Shmami no Kesher Elyoin Doraisa. It must be that to knot the tzitzis to the beged has to be biblical. The Isol Kedaitach the Rabbanon, because if it's only the Rabbanon, but Midoraisa you don't need to have a full knot, just a stitch. Then why did we need a pasuk to tell me? And darshan smuchim, that tzitzis is deicha kloyim, when the beged is linen and the tchelis is wool. Pshita. If it's not knotted, of course it's permitted, because I take if tkifa achas, if you only have one stitch. Eino chibur. That's not considered an attachment that would be mechayiv yushatnus. From the fact that we have to be matir, wool, and linen, al shmamina daraisa, it has to be a knot. It's a good raya. Now, Amar Rabba bar Ravada, Amar Rav Ada, Amar Rav, im nifseka chut meikarai, if where the thread is connected to the beged, if it's cut over there, so that means that if it's cut over there, then you only have 3 instead of 4, psula. Yosef Rav Nachman v'ka'amal Allah shmaitza. Rav Nachman was sitting and saying this over. Eisvei Rav Nachman, ba'medva mamurim b'tchilasai. That's only when it was first put into the beged. Avol Saifai, but if it happened afterwards, Shirav, the remainder of the Gardumav and its stub, Koshu, it's enough as Koshu. Now what's the lashon of Shirav v'Gardumav? My Shirav, my Gardumav, it says 2 things, the remnant and the stubs. My lav Shirav, the ifsik minayu, that it's split on top, and Vishtaya minayu, but it's left there hanging because it's sewn with the rest of it, and Gardunav, the Gardume, that in the middle it's split. Says Gemara, no. If it's cut on the top, it's no good, because then there's only 3 threads instead of 4 threads. Loichada ketani, shirav Gardumav kolshu, shiure Gardumav. If there's a stub left, it's good. So then the Gemara says, so why does it say shiure? Just say v'lema gardume. If it's just a stub left, shirav lamali. Why does it also say remainder? That seems to be telling you another case. Says the Gemara, no. Hakamash malan deba'inon shiura legardumav. That in order for it to be good, there has to be enough left, like we explained, kedei la'anvan, to make a split knot. Now, Yosef Rabba v'kama mishmei Rav, chut shel kerech oila min aminyan. The thread that you make the turns with is one of the threads. Amalei Rav Yosef Shmuel Amra v'loi Rav. Just a point of information. It's not Rav who said this, it was Shmuel that said it. Itmanami Amar Rabba Babachana, Sochli Reb Yoshe de Menusha, Chut Shel Kerech, the thread that you make the rotations with, Eilalam and Aminyan, is part of the threads of the tzitzis. Yosef Rabba v'ka'ama mishmei de Shmuel, Tchelis shekorach ruba. If, remember we said, technically it should be 1/3 that's braided and 2/3 hanging. If, however, you made the braid the majority, it's kosher. So here the Gemara says it's in the reverse. Amalei Rav Yosef Rav Amra v'loi Shmuel. It's Rav that said that and not Shmuel. Imanami Amar Rav Huna bar Yehuda Amar Rav Sheshes Amar Rav Yirmi bar Abba Amar Rav. Tchelis shekorach ruba. Tchelis that you braided the majority is ksher. Rab Chia braided Rav Nasan Masnei Hachi Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav Sheshes Amar Rav Yirmi bar Abba Amar Rav. Tchelis shekorach ruba. If the majority was braided, ksher. If you didn't make the 4 rotations, you only made 1, it's also ksher. Now, as I told you, v'noyei tchelis, if you want to make beautiful tzitzis, shlish gedil, 1/3 is braided, ushnei shlishei anaf, and 2/3 are fringes hanging down. V'kama shir chulya, and how much do we make? How many turns do we make? Tanya Rabbi Aimer Kadesh Yichroich v'Yishne v'Yishalish. To do it once, twice, and 1/3. Tana. But we learned in the Brisa it should be more than that. Hapoiches lo yifchois misheva. If you do the least, it shouldn't be less than 7. V'amoisif lo yosef al shloish esrei. And when you add, it shouldn't be more than 13. As I told you, Arminig is 7, 8, 11, and 13. Now, where does 7 and 13 come from? So we know that when we look at the blue, when we used to have the blue, it's supposed to remind us of the ocean, which reminds us of the sky, which reminds us of the Kisei HaKavod. Now, when we're reminded of the sky, we know that there's 7 Rekiyas. We know that when we say Hashem Echad, so Echad stands for Aleph, one, the one and only. Ches is 8 to 7 heavens and 1 earth. And Dalet is the 4 directions. That's what the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says. So 7 would be the 7 heavens. Hapeichas al yichreis misheva keneged shiva rekim, the 7 heavens. By the way, that's why we have 7 Lashonos in Yalav Yavai. Yalav Yavai v'yagir v'yara v'yaratza v'yishama v'yipoked v'yizacher. Right? So let's say Yalav Yavai v'yagir v'yara v'yishama v'yipoked v'yizacher. Right? 7. So that it should reach the 7 levels, the 7 Rekiyas. That's why on Yom Kippur, at the end of Yom Kippur, we escort Hashem back. He's all the way down on earth. We escort him up through the 7 Rekiyas by saying, Hashem hu Elokim 7 times. Now, V'amoisif lo Yosef al shloish esrei, and if you do the most, it shouldn't be more than 13. That's Keneged Shiva Rekiyim V'shisha Avirim Shebeneim, the 7 heavens and the 6 spaces between the 7 heavens. Now, Tana, Kishu Maskil Beloved. When you do the rotations, you should start with a white thread, because it says Ha-Konaf, the type of the corner, Min Konaf, and the beged was white. Ukishu Messiah beloved. And when you finish, you should finish with the tchelis. This is when we had tchelis. Ukishu Messiah beloved. And when you finish with the white. You could use the tchelis in the middle, but you should finish with the white. Because since you start with the white, that means it's more chashiv. And therefore, you don't end with the tchelis, because malam b'kodesh v'loy meridin. You don't go descend. Rav and Rabba Bar Bachana have a Yosvei. Rav and Rabba Bar Bachana was sitting. Kachalif v'ozalahu gavra. A man passed by. The mechase glima de kula tchelta. He was wearing a garment that was completely blue. Uremele tchelta. And he had tchelis on the garment. Ugedila migdal. And it was completely braided. There was nothing hanging. Amar Rav, so Rav says, Yoi glime, it's a nice garment. The blue is very nice, but below Yoi tchelta, his tzitzis is not nice because it's not supposed to be all braided. Rabba Babachana Amar Yoi glime v'Yoi tchelta. He said that the garment is nice and the tchelis is nice. So the Gemara says, B'maika miflagi, obviously Rabba Babachana held that the whole thing could be braided. What's their argument? Says the Gemara, Rabba Babachana savar ksiv gedil, which is braided, uksiv psil, which is hanging. He holds it could be either one, oy gedil, oy psil. While Rav savar oilam psil ba'inan, you need it to be hanging, and vahi gedilim, and when it says gedilim ta'asalacha, which it makes it sound that it could be all braided, that's l'minyanahu da'asa. Because gedil is plural, is shnayim, and gedilim is another 2. Gedilim is arba. That's how we know we need 4 threads. Asa gedil, and you should make it braided, upaislayo misaychay, and have loose threads hanging after it. Now, Amar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi, Chutei Tzemer, Paitrin Bishal Pishtin. You could have woolen white threads exempt the linen garment. Now, even though it's shatnez, it's okay because it says Widashin Smuchen, right? Silba shatnez, but even so, Gedilim Tasa, you could make tzitzis. The chiddush is tchelis has to be wool. But the white could also be out of wool. Ibaylo. But what about the other way around? Could you have linen tzitzis on a woolen garment? Ibaylo shall pishtim mao sheyifteru b'shel tzemer. You see, there's a svara to say that the white wool could part the linen, since the tchelis wool partas linen. Tzemer b'shel pishtinu the pater. Why? The kaven the tchelis pater, since the tchelis partas, because it's wool, lavanami partas, so the white wool also partas. Aval pishtim b'tzemer loy, but maybe linen on wool not. Oidilma, kaven the chsiv loy silba shatnez tzemer pishtim yachtav. You shouldn't have shatnez, but you could have wool and linen together. Gedilim tasalach, you should make these fringes. Loishnot tzemer b'pishtin, you could put wool on linen. V'loishnot pishtin b'tzemer, you could put linen on wool. So the Gemara says, we'll prove it. Tajma, D'amar Rechava, Amar Rav Yehuda, Chutei tzemer poitrin b'shel pishtin, woolen white tzitzis exempt linen, b'shel pishtin, and linen tzitzis poitrin b'shel tzemer. And not only that, but chutei tzemer upishtin, threads of wool and linen poitrin b'chol makam, on any garment, afilu b'shiron, even on silk garments. Now that assumes that silk garments are chayiv in tzitzis. So the Gemara says not everybody holds this way. Or pliga to Rav Nachman. This is in opposition to Rav Nachman. The Amar Rav Nachman hashiroin peturim min tzitzis. Silk is parted from tzitzis. So asks the Gemara, we learned not that way. Eisvei Rav Nachman hashiroin, silk, va'kalach, expensive silk, va'asrikin, comb silk, kulan chayavim b'tzitzis. So Rav Nachman says, nah, that's only midrabanan. Says the Gemara, ihachi ema seifa, the kulan semer or pishtin paitrin behen. All of these materials, you could put wool and linen. Now that, the Gemara assumes it means put wool together with linen to part the silk. That's how you could use wool and linen even though it's shatnez. How could you put wool and linen on silk if it's only drabanan? How could you be mata shatnez? So he says, no, it doesn't mean wool and linen together. It means wool or linen. Ema ot semer o pishtin, either wool or linen. And hachinami mistavra, diktani seifa, hain, silk threads, b'minon poitrin, exempt silk garments, shaloi b'minon ein poitrin, but not other garments. That silk is only drabanan. Hainu demiftere b'minon. That's how silk tzitzis could help. Eliyamit d'oraisa. How could you have silk tzitzis? Only tzemer pishtinu depater. Where do you have a raya that you could make tzitzis out of silk? Says Gemara, we do have a raya that you could have tzitzis midoraisa from other materials. Kidarava. The Rava Rami. Rava asks a contradiction. Ksiv hakonof. Now hakonof means the hey idea is min konof, that the tzitzis should be the type of the corner of the garment. Uksiv, and it says semer upishtin. So which one is it? So hakeitzad. Tzemer pishtin, that works for any material. Paitrin bein b'minon, whether their own type, and shaloi b'minon, whether it's silk, whether it's cotton. Shar minim b'minon paitrin, it patters their own min. Silk tzitzis will patter a silk garment. Cotton tzitzis will patter a cotton garment. Shaloi b'minon ein paitrin. However, Rav Nachman holds kedetana debei Rabbi Yishmael. There's a famous Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael that the beged in the Torah is only wool and linen. Because it says by tzaras, beged tzemer upishtin. And that's megala all over the Torah that stam beged is only wool and linen. Rav Nachman kedetana debei Rabbi Yishmael. The Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael, hoyel v'nemru begodim b'Torah stam. It says begodim in the Torah without any explanation. And in one place by tzaras, it says semer upishtin, af kol semer upishtin. And therefore, Rav Nachman holds like Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael that silk is not Temer Upishtin, it's not a Beged Midoraisa, and therefore it's only Chayev Midrabanan. However, Amar Abaya, V'hai Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, this Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, Mapka Me'idach Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, is in opposition and takes away from another Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, this contradicting Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael's. The Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael Beged, it says by Tzaras Beged, Ein li ela Beged Semer, I only know Beged of wool. Minayin l'rabbit Semer Gemalim, even camel wool. Semer Anov and rabbit wool. V'noitza shel izin, goat's hair. V'akalach, and superior silk. V'asrikin, and regular silk. V'ashiroyin, comb silk. V'ashirot, and regular silk. Minayin. Talmud Loimer, it says in the pasuk, Oy Beged. Now Rabbi say, some of you might know already that next week, the doctor doesn't want me traveling by plane right now. So next week we're doing a road trip and we're driving back to Lakewood Sunday. So I want to give myself a buffer at least of one night that maybe I will be too tired. So we're going to do now another daf. It's a smallish daf, so we'll pause a moment and we're going to do daf mem. So just let's...
Can I ask something what we just...
No.